I think that God and the universe has a way of working itself out in your life, and every decision that you make, you can learn from it. You can learn a lot. You can be the best person that you need to be. You can build on that, and then move on to the next thing that you want to do. So there's no mistake in life. So this is our agenda, and we'll go through different topics one by one. But most importantly, I want this to be a conversation. So I want you to interrupt me at any point, not just at the end. So please stop me if it doesn't make sense. Even if you disagree, we can talk about it as we go. So I have a couple of trivia questions, and these are mostly reflections of my own thoughts that I struggled with and I had to deal with in my own journey. And I'm challenging you to answer them either for yourself or raise your hand if you want to. And then I'll offer you my opinion, and I want you to find, like our advisor recommended, to find the truth in your own heart, whatever is right for you. So PAs and physicians basically have the same medical education. I've heard different opinions, both between my PA colleagues and between my physician colleagues. And I want to go a little bit through the process to really find the answer that is most likely correct, I think. So as you know, physician assistant studies really require about 4 years of undergraduate, and then the PA program itself is about 2.5 years, so for about a total of 7 years, if you take no time off. And then to go to medical school, you have 4 years of undergrad, you have 4 years of medical school, and then you have 4 years of residency, generally speaking. If you do family, it's 3, dermatology is 4, surgery is 5, neurosurgery is 8, and you can keep going. But it's basically probably 12 and up. So we can see even from here that the education length is almost double. Okay, as you probably all know already. So in PA school, you will be introduced briefly through every specialty. A little bit of pediatrics, internal medicine, cardiology, but because you have to do everything in 1 year, it's really very brief. So you're moving along very quickly. You will feel like you're drinking from the fire hydrant, because you are. And if you think that you won't remember anything, you really won't. But that's just how it goes. You really have to go through the whole body, everything from head to toe in 1 year, okay? So 1 year of didactics and 1 year of clinical rotations, right? About. Medical school, because we have the 2 years of didactics, we go in much more depth. For example, physiology we take for 2 whole years instead of 1 semester, and so forth. Then you have 2 years of medical, as a medical student in different hospitals. Then you graduate in medical school, and then you have 4 years of residency training, okay? Where you are a doctor, but you're still under supervision. So your training is really 2 + 6 until you really are independent. Prerequisites, I'm sure you know about very quickly, we'll go through them. You have a list of prerequisites for PA school. Bachelor's and master's are now almost mandatory. When I went to PA school, they were not. So you simply took your classes and you took your chances. But now I'm sure it's so competitive that it's almost a must to have at least a bachelor, not a master's. And then you have the GRE. For medical school, it's not so critical to have a master's degree. You have to fill the prerequisites, and then you take the dreaded MCAT, which everybody hates. I have to tell you, when I stopped working as a PA, I took 3 months off to study for the MCAT, and I got a tutor because I didn't remember anything from college. And those 3 months were the darkest time of my life. I lived in our home office for 10 hours a day, at my desk, door closed, just crying, studying, and starting all over again. So it's a dark time. It did pay off, but it's a very dark time. When you do apply, what can you do? And I apologize, this is so low. I hope you can see it. When you do apply, things that you can do to boost your CV. I mean, we all want the best grades and the best research and volunteering, but reality is that we have busy lives, right? So, as a PA, it's very important to shadow a PA, to do some kind of patient care work, hands-on, either as a PCA, medical assistant, nurse, scribe, anything you can do, and really have a lot of contact patient hours. And I've done my research this week, and as of today, it's about 2,000 hours that you need. So the more the better. If you can get a job now, be a scribe in the ER or be a medical assistant, anything like that will count, okay? For medical school, you don't need any of that. But in addition to good MCAT, decent MCAT scores, it's strongly recommended that you have research done. So in your spare time, do some research, which is almost impossible to do. But I'm sure FAU has a biology department and other departments that may take undergraduate students. But it's hard to do, and it's hard to get published in time for your application. So that's the tricky part. Not only do you have to participate, but you have to at least submit a manuscript to show this has been our work and this is what we have done. So that's very difficult. Volunteering is hit or miss. You don't really have to volunteer for medical school that much. But most importantly, you have to avoid gaps in your CV. So if you graduate from FAU in 2019 and you apply in 2021, they will want to know what happened. And even if you have good reasons why you took the 2 years off, most people will frown upon that, unless you went to Vietnam and you saved the children, or you were in Baghdad and you killed, you know, the bad guys. So you really have to have a very strong explanation. So think very clearly and very carefully if you decide to take time off, because they will pick on you in your interview. I mean, even if a parent dies or a child, you really have to come back to work in a reasonable amount of time, whatever that means, right? Because we all deal with our grief differently. But it's not considered acceptable to take a year to travel to Italy. You know, it's not. So, but to go to medical school, you really don't have to do any kind of medical work. You can go straight from college, high school, undergrad, medical school, residency. You don't have to have really almost any patient care experience, which is crazy. But that's how it is. For the interview, a portion, no matter what school you go to, this is just one example, and you guys have this presentation, so you don't have to take notes. You can Google it, any other sites. There are like the 50 most asked questions in an interview. Excuse me, So I strongly recommend that you go through them, write them down in a journal, and the answer is recommended that it should be about 2 minutes per question. So I wrote down my answers, and then I videotaped myself delivering them. I'm very self-conscious of my accent, and I'm a very nervous person, so to me it was very important to work through that. And when I watched my own video, I did not like what I saw. You know, your body language is constricted, you speak too much, you do different things. So it's very important for you to see yourself, hopefully with a friend that can be honest with you and give you positive feedback. So the answer should be about 2 minutes. Make sure you only answer the question. Don't go off on tangents, because the more you talk, the more you can get in trouble. So you're almost like in a court of law. You know, answer the question, listen to the question, take 5 seconds, and then answer the question. And when you're done, you stop. Okay? When we're nervous, we speak a lot, and they pick up on that. So practice, videotape yourself. After you go 2 or 3 times through every question, you'll be like a pro, I think. So qualities, more like a type of personalities that I'm trying to categorize here. And again, like the advisor said, this is simply my opinion. You know, we can agree to disagree if you don't think I'm correct. but this is simply my opinion. What makes a good PA versus a good physician? And I challenge you to really search within your heart and be honest with the type of person that you are. And don't decide where you go to school based on what you think you can do, but the type of person that you are. Because if you follow that, you will be happy with your choice. And you will probably not think that you've made the wrong decision. So PAs, obviously all of you, all of us, have an interest in healthcare. That's why we are here. And an important personality trait, I think, is that you're willing and able to take instruction from a boss that you may or may not like, which is hard. I'm the first to say. If you're in a group, let's say you're camping with somebody and something goes wrong, are you the person to take charge and bring everybody to safety? Or are you the person that is happy when a leader rises and you will be the best team member to bring the group to safety? Which person are you? If the person that rises in the group doesn't do it well enough, are you frustrated? Or are you able to say, well, he's doing his best, she's doing her best, this is the best we can do? Yes?
What if you feel like you're a little bit of both, but depending on the situation?
Good luck. It's tough. It's tough. It's a very good question, because most of our personalities are a mix. None of us are always leaders, always followers. A good place to start is to ask a loved one, like if you have a partner or a parent that you get along with and they are honest with you, or a best friend, to say, and be willing to listen or consider. If you trust them and they're not speaking out of jealousy or out of envy, consider their opinion. That's a very good question. That's the $1 million question. The physician usually is a type A personality because you don't want to have a boss, basically. So you want to do whatever you can to avoid having a lot of bosses on top of you. Now that is not a reality. Most physicians still have bosses because we work for hospitals with administrators who tell us how to practice medicine. We have office managers who tell us how to bill the insurance, and who tell us which patients we can and cannot see because we don't make money. So we still have a lot of bosses, but that's the thought. The higher you rise, the fewer people on top of you. You have to be passionate enough about medicine to really kind of store that energy so that when you're fatigued and you're in the anatomy lab at 2 o'clock in the morning, and when your lover fights with you and threatens to leave you, you will be able to tap into that energy to say, I'm doing the right thing, I know that this is what I want. And you have to write down that passion, because you will have so many moments of doubt, and you will have to be able to have enough of it to not second guess yourself and to have enough energy to go on. So I think that's crucial, because if you don't think you have enough, you don't. You don't. Even if you think you have enough, you'll doubt yourself. But if you don't think you have enough, you probably don't. So that's a very good way to kind of judge yourself. And then obviously willing to commit to 8+ years from this point on, which is a long time, but you're all very young. So I don't want to hear about that. Okay. So the second thought, challenging question. And I think this speaks mostly to the girls, to the women, because men don't ever have this problem, right? Is it true or false that I have to postpone or give up starting a family in order to go to medical school? Do you guys think about that? Right. We all do. Our clock is ticking. You know, those babies, right? By 30. A boy and a girl, or 3 actually. 3 is the hot number now. Yeah. I don't think so. I don't think you have to give up having a family at all. You may have to delay it maybe by 3 years, 4 or 5 years, which is not a big deal if you start at the age of 25, right? You can have babies by 30. Right? You're all very young. So I don't think you have to choose. And that's the beauty of it. I don't want any of the girls, the women in this audience, to choose to go to PA school because they feel that they have to make a choice and they're going to choose the less selfish choice. Because that would not be true to yourself. You can be a great mother of 2 or 3 or 1.5 children. Whatever you choose to do. If you want to be a stay-at-home mom or a physician or a scientist, it's not directly proportionate to your job or to the amount of hours that you work. So don't make a decision based on that. And I can answer questions about my own experience of raising children, and we can go into that later, but I don't think you have to choose. I've had help, we had nannies, we had family, we did whatever we could, and we have 2 great children, and they're just fine. They didn't suffer. I don't think they did. We'll see. So, the tuition and the debt, right? That's another big thing. And it depends from what background you're coming from. Some people are very much against loading up on debt. Some people think that it's okay, it's an investment in your education. So, however your parents brought you up really has a lot of influence on your decision making. But I want us to look at the numbers objectively as a scientist. Let's run the numbers like an accountant. Let's put our emotions on the side and what our parents taught us, and let's run the numbers. And we'll decide if the numbers make sense or not, objectively. So, the PA school, this is just an estimate. In the 2 years, you'll probably borrow, say, $50,000. If you go to, I'm sorry, about $50,000 per year, let's say, and over the 2 years, you incur a debt of about $100,000. For medical school, this is my experience at Nova, $50,000 a year, quite a penny, time for 4 years. And that doesn't include living expenses. I lived at home, obviously. So at least $200,000 for the 4 years. And then I threw in some living expenses because you'll need to rent and buy food and gas and all of that. So we'll work with those 2 numbers. I thought I had another slide. Okay, let's do this slide first. Somehow I mixed them up. So, incurring debt and paying it off. Let's work through the PA model first. Let's say you incur a debt of $100,000. Your average salary in South Florida is about $81,000. That's according to Google. And you plateau if you work normal 40 hours a week at about 100. Okay, you can make more if you're a surgical orthopedic PA working a lot more, or dermatology doing more surgery, but those are the exceptions. We're talking about normal people. So you have a debt of 100, and you would technically, if you saved everything, you can pay it back in a year and a half, right? After you plateau, right? Everybody follow so far? And then in your next 20 years, let's assume we work for the next 20 years only, your income will be about $1.6 million. Okay? And again, running the numbers objectively, not emotionally. Okay? Physician, let's say you incur a debt of $300,000, being conservative. Your average salary in South Florida, doing family medicine. Internal, you make a little bit more. Higher specialties, you make significantly more. Let's say you make about 200. You plateau at about 300. Let's say again in family internal. Your debt from medical school is about 300. You technically can pay it back in a year and a half, just like the PA. So if you saved everything in your first 2 years of working, you could pay off your debt. If you live with mom and dad and don't spend anything, right? And then your earning potential for the next 20 years is about $4 million. So putting our emotions, one second, I see you. Putting our emotions on the shelf, these are the numbers. Now, I believe that if the world continues to be well and the economy holds, investing in your education is a good business deal. Just from the business point of view, right? So, there you have it, yes.
For the MD/DO, the debt for medical school, paying it off in a year and a half, does that account for residency, the years where you're paying
Good question.
the 100 plus thousand salary?
Good question. So your debt doesn't become due until you are finished with residency. So you don't have to pay just yet. So if you have loans with interest, they're not due yet. And in residency, I make this year, I'm a first year dermatology resident, I make 45. So you make a small salary. So one, you don't have to pay the school anymore. You have a small salary and your debt is not due yet. So almost like, I didn't even put those years in because it's almost like a wash. You spend your 40, you don't save, you don't pay your debts, you don't do anything with it, you just waste it. You live, right? You live with it, right? So I didn't count those years, but that's what happens in residency. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, so when you enter residency, the debt for medical school doesn't start to accumulate?
Correct.
Okay.
Only when you graduate and you start working as an independent doctor.
Okay.
Because in residency, you're still in training. So you're like out, but not really. You know, you're still under supervision. So now we're gonna go back to the order that I messed up. Okay, the scope of practice. I think this is important. I think there's a significant misunderstanding as to the scope of practice of PAs. I think there's the belief that the PA is the associate of the physician, and they basically divide the work half and half, and they go at it, and when the work is done, they go home. That is only true in primary care. So if you go into the family practice, that is mostly true, maybe 95% of the time. The higher you rise in the specialty, the less true that is. And that will become the source of your frustration. And I'll get to that. So, the PA co-leads because you're entrusted with about maybe 80% of the physician responsibilities you can do, you will do. So you co-lead, okay? But mostly you execute because you learn the physician's ways of treating patients and you replicate it, okay? So you basically copy his or her style, and that's how you will treat your patients, okay? So you replicate, you extend the physician, you are his or her extender, okay? You're in a supporting role, and you're complementing them. You have supervision, depending exactly where you are in the specialty continuum, from family, internal to orthopedic surgery, right? Different level of supervision. And you have to be a good team player, because you're the assistant. If the person you're assisting doesn't like you, you're done, right? So you have to be a very good team player. The physician is a team leader, and usually the business owner in a small practice, right? And they call the shots. So if they are smart and kind, they call good shots, and if they're not, they don't. So then you leave. And then he or she is your supervisor for obvious medical reasons and legal reasons. Licensure, you know, you have to take the PANCE when you're done. This is after your 2.5 years. We took USMLE step 1 after 2 years, step 2 after 1 more year, step 3 after 1 more year, and when you're done with the residency, you take the final board exam. So basically every 2 years you have boards. Yes?
Since you were a PA first, can you kind of renew your license and then be a PA sometimes and then
Yes.
be a doctor
Yeah,
another time?
yeah, I can. Actually, when I stopped working, I considered keeping my license active so that I could work in medical school, which you can't, ever. No, you can't. You want to kill yourself as it is. But I didn't because you have to do CMEs. You have to do continuing education classes, and being in medical school is not considered a medical education for PA purposes. Weird, right?
Yeah.
So I would have had to do like 100 hours of this and that. So I was like, no. So I have it, but it's inactive. But you technically can. Absolutely. Your license will, your ability to practice medicine will always be yours. Nobody can take that away from you, whether you choose to use it or not. So I will always be a PA, right? Another soft question. What do you think about that? Does it sound true to you or no? And I want you to feel it for yourself. So, most young people like you and most young doctors graduating, we don't know any medicine really at all. That's why it takes 6 years to make a doctor, to push them through residency and really train them and teach them. So when we all graduate, we don't know anything, and we are scared, as we should be, because patients' lives are in our hands. And we appreciate a preceptor, a physician, a supervisor to teach us and lead us along the way. The only caveat is that when you have learned and you feel that you have grown up and that you could spread your wings and fly, the question is, can you? Okay, so as an example from my own life, I was a PA at Memorial in trauma in Hollywood, right? Recent graduate from Nova, didn't know anything. A second year surgical resident is my team player, right? He also doesn't know anything, as expected, right? He should have known a little bit more than me, but he was not as bright as me. True fact. I think. I have witnesses. So we're both dumb and innocent and happy, and we're learning. We know in 5 years from now we'll be great, okay? And time goes by, and Matt, his name was Matt. And Matt became a 3rd year, a 4th year, a 5th year surgical resident, and he graduated, became a surgeon, and he was going to do a fellowship and return to our institution to be my boss. And I said to myself, over my dead body. And I felt my frustration rising up in me because it had been a few years where we both learned. I learned more than him. because I also have to prove myself. As a woman in the hospital, you also have to prove yourself, so get ready. So 4 or 5 years later, he's graduating, he's the surgeon, and he's coming back to be my boss. But I could not graduate. I had learned, I was ready to fly, but I could not graduate. I was going to be his PA. And that bothered me. Now, if it doesn't bother you, that's great. But I'm telling you that it bothered me. Maybe I'm prideful, and I know I am. I'm praying about that. No, it's true. But it bothered me. And this is only one person's experience and opinion. But the supervision that you appreciate now when you graduate, because you don't know anything and you're going to hurt patients, is going to be the same source of a different feeling, which could be frustration, in 5 or 10 years from that one. And hopefully it's not, but it was for me. So I just wanted to share that with you, to be honest. Okay? So we touched about this, how much independence you have. After trauma, I moved to family practice. I worked there for 5 years as a PA, and I had almost complete independence. Basically, we had an office with 2 sides. My boss was on one side, I was on the other side. I had my own schedule, my own patients, my own staff. And he didn't talk to me for a week because his policy was, no news is good news. If you don't need me and I don't need you, you see your patients, I'll see mine, and we go home. And that was okay. He even went on vacation for 3 weeks and left me alone with 5,000 patients. I kept the office open, and he never called me. He was out of the country. So when he came back, I said, Josh, I was hurt. You know, I'm a girl. I said, Josh, well, what if something happened? You know, you don't care. He goes, well, either you took care of them, you send them to the ER. What else can I do from a different country? So that was that. So I had almost complete independence in family practice, right? And it's similar in IM and mostly peds. So this is primary care, right? General medicine from here to here, right? As you go up the ladder in specialties, you have less independence, because when I'm taking my husband next week to the allergist, I want to see the specialist. I want to know what new drugs are there, what else can he do and try, okay? So I want to see the person that trained at Harvard and has worked with who knows who, right? So as you go up the ladder, the PA has less independence. Obviously the doctor has the independence, but you do have to negotiate with partners if you're in a group of physicians, and now more and more you have to negotiate with managers in hospitals and your staff, your office managers, which is a nuisance. So you still have to, negotiate and bend, but more from a kind of like an equal position. Okay. What about this? This actually challenge you to Google, because I don't know the objective answer to this one. So we'll move on, since I don't want to give you just my own opinion. That's fine. So, obviously the higher paying job gives you more satisfaction for obvious reasons, right? And the higher paying jobs give you better work-life balance, because you don't have to work so many hours to make enough money, right? And you have lower satisfaction as you go up the ladder, believe it or not, because you perform less things on your own, and you feel more like an extension of somebody else, okay? And that's self-explanatory. Actually, physicians in specialties have more satisfaction because they get referrals from their colleagues, so they feel even smarter, they feel very specialized, and they make more money. And then, of course, the same as PAs, the more money you make, the less hours you can work because you don't have to.
We were working with that doctor that left the country,
Mhm.
I think I'm investment. They pay you based on the amount of patients you see.
No, you're paid salary. Yeah. So most PAs are paid salary. You're not paid incentive or. So you pay your salary.
Even if you see one patient a day,
Uh-huh.
you will be getting paid the same.
Yes. Yeah. Most PAs' salaries are negotiated based on a salary. Okay. Yeah. But of course, with him being gone, I was seeing my normal patients and then his sick patients, and then all of the labs and all of the X-ray reports and all of the specialty reports were coming to my desk. So, but same price, yes.
What about raises?
Raises?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I don't mind talking about money. I started at Memorial, this was 2003. Yes. I started with, it's been a long time. I started with 65,000. And within about 2 years at the hospital, I was making about 75. And when I came to family, I asked him for 85 because he knew that I could do things. And then within 5 years, I was making 100. But I was only working 35 hours a week. Yeah.
Because I heard that like PAs don't really get raises. I don't know
Not
if that's
true,
a
you have to
good thing.
negotiate hard.
Okay.
You have to know how many patients you see, obviously. You have to know how much is being billed for a level 3 or level 4 visit. If you do biopsies, how much does a biopsy cost? I was doing all the pap smears in the office. How much does the insurance pay? And you run the numbers. When you negotiate every year, the party line was always, oh, there's no money, you know how it is. I'm like, no. I know there's money because I'm bringing the money, right? So you have to share with me. And I negotiated hard, and every year he gave me what I wanted because I think I was reasonable. And he knew that if I left with my training, I could make 100 somewhere else. I never pushed it over 100 because if you keep pushing it, they will fire you. Because they can get 2 of you for 110, 120, and they get more work. So you have to kind of know where your plateau is, and that's what I talked about, the plateau. You have to know, based on your profession, what is your plateau. So unless you have special skills, you will kind of hit that plateau. Think about that one. How many of the women think this is true? Quite a few, and the others maybe are not sure. This is what we think. And I'm gonna tell you why it's not true. If you make $200 an hour, can you work fewer hours than if you make $60 an hour? You can. So if you choose to work less, the more you make per hour, the less you need to work, right? The other flip of the coin is, if I hire help, will I send my PA home before I go home or after I go home? Right? I'm selfish. Most people are selfish. You get help because you want a better lifestyle. So you're not gonna go home before the physician. Unless you negotiate for fewer hours like I did. I went from 40 to 35 and he cut my salary. And he threatened that to kind of keep me at the 40, and I was accepting the lower salary. And I said, no, thank you, I'll work 35, and he cut my salary. So you will not go home before the physician. So as women raising children, you will not have, based on that, a better work-life balance. Also based on the money, because if you need to make money, you're gonna be pressured to work at least 40 hours a week. I have two couples that I know well, and I'm gonna give you their example to let you know. Well, before I do that, when I was in family practice, going from 45 to 30, another part-time physician working in our office, Dr. Lichtenstein, had 3 little children, and she was working part-time as well. But her hourly rate was double than mine. So we both took care of our children and loved medicine and worked part-time, but she was making twice the money that I was, right? So as a PA or as a physician, you can choose to work less, as long as you understand and you accept the salary, right? I'll go back to the 2 couples that I was gonna mention. So both of them can work full-time or part-time or extra time. If you wanna be orthopedic surgery, make $200,000, you can.
How many hours a week is like a normal residency? How much do you end up working in residency?
There's a cap of 80 hours a week.
That's all?
Yeah, that's all. And only rarely do you exceed that, because you can't, it's illegal. So when you do, you have to not report it, because then the program gets in trouble. So you're really encouraged to not work more than 8 hours a week. And very few rotations actually now keep you for 80 hours, unless you're on surgery. Surgery residents are still abused a little bit. Yes.
There's also studying to do at the same time though, correct?
Yes and no. In residency, I mean, yes, there is. But if you're at the hospital for 12 hours, you have a lot of downtime, because you're not really busy. It's more like inefficient systems keeping you there unnecessarily, leading to frustration and blah, blah, blah. That's another conversation. So you're in the library, you're in your room, you're in the cafeteria, and you can read. And that's where you actually do most of your reading, at work. So when you come home, it's been 12 hours, your cat is crying, you're done, right? So, yeah. But there's not so much studying in residency. It's more like hands-on. You look things up, like you saw a difficult case I did most today with their interesting flap. I pulled it out right there on the phone to read about the flap. So it's more like case-based immediate learning, more like them sitting down for hours. So that's only in medical school mostly. Yeah, in dermatology though, if I could toot our own horn, we have to study a lot. So like on Saturdays and Sundays, I study for many hours on end. I have to sit down. And I set my alarm 50 minutes and take 10 minutes off, break, then another 50, and I do cycles like that. I put myself in the office at home. You have to study. But I want to, I like it, so it's a labor of love. All right, so you can work full-time or part-time. We talked about the debt. I think we can agree, my opinion, that investing in your education is a good investment that will pay off, and unless something goes terribly wrong with the economy or with something else, you'll be able to be well off from that investment. And we talked about this.
Good.
They're all trick questions unless you haven't figured it out. Huh?
False.
Oh, of course, of course. If you practice medicine and you have the ability to heal and to kill, you will be held responsible. Okay? So generally, with lawsuits, the person suing will go for the deepest pockets. And if you work for the hospital, it will be the hospital and the physician and you and the nurses and their brothers, like everybody, okay? And if you're in the office, it's the physician and you and the nurse, really everybody. Because if they can get anything from anyone, they'll nominate you in the suit. When I was in trauma, we were sued, the hospital, the surgeons, myself, the nurses, the physical therapists, everybody was sued. When we testified, we went to court, God help us. So, and it doesn't matter that you barely touched the patient one morning. You are in the chart. Your name is in the chart. They will nominate you. So, do you need malpractice insurance? Yes. Should you get your own versus the physician extending the umbrella over you? Probably you should get your own. Because there are no conflict of interest. If you're both nominated and the physician's insurance decides to use you as the scapegoat to take the blame, they may put it on you and your history. So you want to have your own representation with your independent policy for best chances of being represented well. A friend of mine that was a PA with me at Mount Sinai, she had 20 years of experience in like surgical, very, very specialized work. Physician was sued, she was nominated, it was decided that it was her fault. The physician said that she never consulted with him, she never told him what she was going to do, therefore he was not informed, so she acted negligently. She was found to blame, she was fired, and at that point she could not buy malpractice insurance anymore. Nobody would cover her. So she had to work for the hospital, which gives you an umbrella policy. Every employee is covered. But this woman had a lifetime of experience, very competent. One thing went bad, and now she had very limited choices. Yes?
So how would you avoid that? Like, would you
Don't get sued.
Well, so like you could get the doctor to sign off on your every word?
But they won't.
Right.
They won't.
So just
That's the
get
whole
insurance
point
for
of
yourself.
getting help is that you don't have to do everything.
Right.
So technically, they're supposed to look at every chart, and they're supposed to agree with every plan, with every prescription and every, so in theory, that's what happens. In practice, they trust you, they train you, and you function well, and things don't go bad, almost ever, and everything is well. That's the truth. That's the truth. In the state of Florida, you can go there. You can choose to have no malpractice insurance, and you should talk to an attorney. You set up a fund where if you get sued, the patient can go after that fund, and when the funds are exhausted, they can go after you personally. It's a somewhat complicated legal matter, but you can do it. And many physicians in Florida don't have malpractice insurance. OBGYNs don't. My boss in family practice did not towards the end. Yeah.
Yes? How much would you say malpractice is?
It's a very good question. For me, at the time, it was only a few $1,000s. We looked up, my son and I yesterday, that for some surgeons in other states, and correct me if I'm wrong, if you know better, it can be up to $80,000 a year. So it depends what you do, what is the level of exposure, like how likely are you to threaten to hurt people, and in what state. Yeah. So like for OBGYNs, yes.
very good friend of mine, OB-GYN. Cut his hours back to about 30 hours a week. He was making about $275,000 a year, and he was paying $250,000 a year for insurance.
OB-GYN,
Did he retire? Yes.
of course. I mean, you can't practice anymore. You can't keep your doors open anymore.
That's why a lot of OBs are dropping out.
Yes.
They'll do the gynae work, but they're not.
They can. And many physicians that are a little bit older, that practice for 20, 30 years, with all these insurance prices, they're like, this is not working for us to keep our doors open anymore. So they retire early. They just say, we're done. But that's the reality that we live in. So, what is the best way not to get sued? What do you think? No, it's a good question. How do you avoid lawsuits? Besides being lucky.
Better and best records.
That as well. And a great relationship with the patient. If you will screw up. You will screw up if you work long enough. If you have a good relationship with the patient, you're less likely to be sued than if you have a cold or a negative relationship. So that is the best predictor of becoming sued or not. And then when you get to court, you better have good records. Because if it's not on paper, it hasn't happened. And you won't remember in 5 years what you did to Mrs. Jones. Are you kidding me? You won't remember at all. But if you have a good relationship with them, they're less likely to sue even when you screw up. Even when you screw up, you will explain, you will apologize, not in detail, but in attitude, and they are less likely to sue you. Get more practice. I have two final quotes that I hope to leave you with. Success is not final, and failure is not fatal. It is the courage to continue that counts. So no matter what you choose, what you do, even if you land on your butt and you really regret your choices, just keep going and you'll be okay. And I have one more. Try not to become a person of success, whatever that means for you, but rather become a person of value. And no matter what type of work you will do, you will bring the best version of you to the table. Okay? And now I want to open the floor for more questions. Yes.
When did you have your children?
It came out. I came from Romania after high school. I was 18. I married my husband at 19. We got pregnant in our honeymoon. So before I turned 20, we had a son. And then our daughter was born 4 years later. She was planned. But yeah, but when I went to PA school, my kids were like 6 and 2. Yeah, so I was 27-ish when I went to PA school. I was already older with 2 kids, but it can be done. And also, yes.
Have you heard of anyone or anybody who has kids during medical school?
Yes, I'm glad you asked.
How is that?
Half of the, well, I don't know about half, but like a good number of girls, women in my class were married, and a number of them had 1 or 2 children. And then every woman basically in residency has 1 or 2 children. So by the time you graduate, you kind of got it done. So you negotiate, you make it work. I mean, you do. And they're just fine. They're just fine. Babies don't remember. If you feed them and love them and change them, they don't remember. When I was in PA school, good story, I think. We brought a nanny from Romania for my daughter Rachel. And she would come with her work visa for 6 months at a time and have to go back, right? So we brought her 3 times in a row, like a 1.5 years with breaks, right? So the time before last, I told Rachel, guess what? Victoria's coming back. She was like 2.5. And she looked at me, she goes, who's Victoria? She doesn't remember the name. She does not remember the name. She remembered me. Right? So they're loved, they're fed, they're safe, and they'll be fine. They will be fine. And some children are not fine even when you stay home with them. They're not. You've got them. They're not fine. So don't take the whole responsibility on you. If I do this, they're going to be messed up, and if I do this, they're going to be saints. What do you know? Like seriously. They'll be fine. Yes.
Before the medical school, you said something about the gap year, right? If you go to do a master's degree and then to medical school, are they going to be?
No, that's a good explanation. That's a good way to spend a year. Or if you take a year to do research, or to take to do like a post-bac classes to improve your GPA. It's a good way to spend your time. Just don't go in Vietnam for a year to find yourself. Even though that may be what you need, but yes.
Why would you say that PA satisfaction was the greatest in either internal medicine, family medicine, rather than higher specialties? Why would
I think it relates to independence. The more independent you can be, the more, this is maybe my philosophy of life, you feel industrious. You feel that you're calling the shots, that you're making decisions, that you're smart enough and entrusted enough to run the process. And for me, and I think for many people, that leads to satisfaction. Because you feel like you finally grew up. Like, I'm doing this. I was in Mo surgery today in South Beach, in Miami Beach. And I'm a visiting resident in the practice, right? There's a surgeon, a fellow, a PA, and the staff. So it's my second day there. I'm visiting for the week. And because I was there, the PA had to give me her position, and she became one of the staff members. So I was doing the surgeries with the surgeon, and she was charting, right? So we're doing like the top of a specialty, which is dermatology is one step, and then Mohs surgery is the next step. But she is the greatest person, but she had to let me take the role while I was there. So that's how I translate satisfaction, in being industrious and being on your own. Yeah. Yes.
Did you always want to stay in South Florida? Like, how does it work?
Yeah, so with medical school, most likely you'll have to relocate. Because what are the chances of you getting accepted here and getting accepted in residency here? They're very slim, right? I was very lucky that I got to do everything here without moving, because I could not have moved. My husband's business is here, and he would not have moved with me, and I would not have gone without him. Yeah, I don't think you can leave a man for 3 years and be okay. I don't. I'm old-fashioned. I don't think you guys do well alone. I don't. I've seen it. Some people do it well, but I've seen the opposite. I wouldn't do it. Yes.
So going into a new practice, is the doctor expecting you as a PA to like know the gist of stuff, or is he gonna take you under his wing and he going to explain everything?
He's gonna expect you to know, and when you don't know, many times he won't train you enough. You have to kind of learn it. It's very tricky. You have to learn a lot on your own and know when to ask for help. When I came, and this is a one-person report, when I came from trauma to family, I told my boss, if you would train me. And he goes, that's nonsense. I've known you as a student, you're very smart. I said, yes, but what diabetes? Where's the insulin again? Like, where's the pancreas, okay? So he goes, You coming from the ICU where you're running your own vents and drips and you're intubating and you're saving trauma patients. I'm sure you can figure it out. I said, Josh, you're not hearing me. I don't know anything about insulin. I don't know anything about lisinopril, hypertension, diabetic ulcers. I didn't. I could run an ICU, but I couldn't prescribe an antihypertensive. And he laughed. Very well-natured guy, friend of mine. And then I said, no, but honestly, can I hang out with you for a week? He goes, no, Monday you're having a schedule. We have patients for you. And I said, okay, shit, this is happening. So then I said, can I hang out with you for one day? He goes, Simona, really, honestly, no. And that's how I started family practice. And then I would excuse myself from the patient's room. I'd be like, oh, my pager just went off. I would go in the office and look it up. I would look it up. And he was in the room with other patients. I could not interrupt him or wait for 10 minutes because my patient was, and I had a patient every 15 minutes. You have to see 4 patients per hour. That's kind of the standard. So you gotta be moving and look smart. So some people train you more. I know specialists where the PA hangs out with them for 3 months, for 6 months, for a year in dermatology. There's a lot of training. But not everyone does that. Yeah, it's tricky. Yes?
When you say that kind of relates to like a higher level of certification, like the more your physician will train you and like give you that ability, the higher certification will be?
The higher my satisfaction would have been?
Yeah.
Sure, because you feel competent.
Yeah.
You would not feel like you're a fraud.
Like in the higher.
But you already feel like a fraud because you're like starting out. But like I was competent at the hospital after 3 years of trauma. I had like paid my dues. But now, and that's another thing, whenever you switch specialties, you are graduating PA school again. So the flexibility that is attractive to you now is gonna annoy you when you switch jobs because you're starting from scratch. And if you think you know family from trauma or ortho from general surgery, you're wrong. You know how to scrub. You get in the OR. That's it. Yes.
Why did you decide to leave the hospital?
The drama between the women. It's always the women. The guys are fine. I've never had a problem with the guys. It's the women. And the surgeons are type A personalities. They're little gods walking around. And then the women have a lot to prove and they are misunderstood. And it's very dramatic. So after 3 years, I was coming home crying every night. And my husband said, this is ridiculous. Yes.
How long were you PA for in total, and then how long did you know you wanted to switch, or how was that switch?
I was a PA for 8 years, 3 plus 5, and I knew, well, let me backtrack. I had wanted to go to medical school almost from the beginning, but I felt like, because I had 2 small children, going to PA school was going to be the less selfish choice. And then I knew early in my PA career that I was not going to be very happy, but I thought I could work through it. However, it dawned on me that if you're unhappy and you can change your circumstance, you should, or stop complaining. So I chose, instead of stopping complaining, I chose to fix it. So I knew pretty quickly, maybe in the first couple of years. Yeah. Yes.
You mentioned how as a doctor you research and you learn in your free time. Do you think it's necessary for PAs to do the same?
It's imperative. And that's another reason why you as a PA have to do more reading on your own than a physician. And I'll tell you why. Because in the circles that physicians run, constantly talking to specialists, constantly having to look up things, a new treatment plan, because you're leading the team, right? So you have to always be cutting edge, and the patients keep you accountable. For the PA, there's not, that pressure is not there. And it's easy to kind of coast. And you can realize 5 years later that you haven't read a journal article, you haven't attended a meeting, you haven't looked up things in your books anymore, or read online, which is where we read now, we don't read books anymore. But so it's easy to coast because the pressure is not there. So you have to even more, you have to keep yourself accountable. Another thing that happened to me in PA school / medical school, being around other medical students, you're always pimped. And either you hate it or you love it. I liked it because I think it makes you better later. In the moment you're embarrassed, but later it makes you better. So I like the challenge. I like, okay, tomorrow, tell me about that, what's that, so always learning. Once I graduated, nobody asked me anything anymore. Other residents don't want to pimp me because they're visiting and I'm there to stay. The attendings don't want to talk to me because they don't want to educate me. They want me to do the work. And the medical students will never challenge me because I'm their boss, right? So you're kind of in this in between spaces where you're like, why is nobody talking to me anymore? That's how I felt. And I love the learning. Obviously, I'm a nerd. I went back to school repeatedly throughout my adult life. So I love the learning. So I missed that when I graduated. I was like, oh, what now? So it depends how you are. If you hate school, you're not like me. If you hate the challenge, if you hate learning, and if you can't wait to be done, don't go to medical school. Yes.
So how would you describe the rigor of the coursework from PA school to med school,
Very
learning,
good question.
condensing all of that in 2 years?
Yeah, so the first year of PA school is similar to medical school in intensity, where you study all the time, you don't really see your family, and you sleep and eat. So the first year is like 2 years of medical school, where that's why you can't work. It's not that you can't, you can't. So nobody worked in my PA class or in my medical school. Towards the end, some of my medical student colleagues were tutoring, $20 an hour, but it's about, the load is about the same. So you live and breathe studying. And interestingly, going back to medical school, I thought, it's going to be quite so hard for me. I mean, after all, I've kind of done this before, and I'm going to be kind of cruising a little bit and telling them how it's done. I had to study a lot. I had to study every day, 6 days a week, from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. And I took half of a Sunday off. So every Sunday we go to church, we have a family lunch, we took a nap, and that's so sad. And then studied the whole afternoon for 2 years. After PA school and after working for 8 years. Because you go back to biochem and physiology and all that nonsense. So, yeah. But for the first year of PA school, you will cry. Well worth it though. Yes.
Do you think guys have an advantage or a disadvantage when applying to PA school with the ratio?
I don't know about PA school anymore. I haven't looked at statistics. In medical school, I think across the country is about 51 female to 49 male. So a slight, but it could be accidental. I'm not sure PA school.
Yeah, because I noticed there's 80% girls.
I noticed it.
But you have to ask yourself why.
Yeah.
And I've noticed that most of those girls are pretty. No, it's an honest question, they are. PA classes have the best looking girls. I have a theory about that. It's because pretty young women want to have a quick career and they want to get married and have children. That's my theory on it. And you will see, if you go to Loma, you'll see the programs, physical therapy, respiratory therapy, PA school, medical school. You'll see what I'm talking about. I'm not crazy. It's true. You'll see. Like all the medical students were dating the PA students. Yes.
How similar was taking the PANCE versus the USMLE and the board examinations?
It's like having a dental cleaning versus a root canal. Yeah, so the USMLE is 8 hours long. And you do chunks of, I think it's 50 questions. And then you have like a 3-minute bathroom break where you have to check in and out with security and you get body searched. And then you swallow a chocolate pill in the bathroom. Like it's very painful. And then,
Wait,
yeah. It's really sad,
nobody
yeah.
likes.
Yeah. Yeah, you have to be careful what you eat because you can't like go too much or, you know, yeah. It's painful, but I mean, it's one day, it's one bad day. You can do anything for one day, right?
Would you say that USMLE was more difficult than the PANCE? Definitely.
Yeah. And your step 1 is what decides your residency choices. So after the first 2 years of medical school, you take your step 1, and that's what makes you or breaks you. Step 2 can hurt you, can help you, but program directors look at your step 1 as a sign of, that's your new MCAT, that's your new, yeah. And you have to do research in medical school if you want to go to a specialty, because you want to be published by the time you apply, which you apply at the end of your 3rd year. So that means in your 1st and 2nd year of medical school, you have to do research and then publish it. Excuse me. So that by the time you apply, you can say that you published. So for dermatology, the average publication that we have to have in the country, the average is 6 publications. So you have to be a published author 6 times to get accepted into dermatology. So guess what I was doing in the 1st semester of medical school? I went to the physiology department, I knocked on his door, and I said, we gotta do research together. And the guy said, you're crazy. I said, no, you haven't met me. We're gonna do research together. And in 2 years, we published 2 papers. Yeah. But you gotta do it. If you know what you want, you can do it. You just have to make a plan, and you do it.